There are islands in One Piece that change the story the moment we learn their name. Ohara changed how we understood history. Laugh Tale changed how we understood Roger. Marijoa changed how we understood power. But God Valley changed how we understood the entire world. Because for years, the story sounded simple. 38 years ago, on a mysterious island in the West Blue, Gold D. Roger and Monkey D. Garp joined forces to defeat Rocks D. Xebec. That was the legend. Roger and Garp stopped the most dangerous pirate in history. Garp became the hero of the Marines. The Rocks pirates collapsed and the world moved on. But that version of the story was never the truth. It was the version the world government allowed to survive. Because God Valley was not just a battle. It was not just Roger and Garp versus Rocks. It was a genocide. It was a bloodline purged. It was a celestial dragon hunting game. It was the place where Kuma's childhood was destroyed, where Dragon saw the real face of justice, where Shanks was separated from his family, where Harold failed to save his friend, where Rocks lost everything, and where Emu's existence had to be buried so deeply that the island itself was erased from the world. That is why God Valley matters, because God Valley was not the only tragedy. It was the place where every future tragedy in One Piece began. And the most disturbing part is that God Valley did not become a tragedy by accident. It was selected, marked, prepared, turned into a stage before Roger arrived, before Garp became a hero, before Rocks became a demon, before the newspapers rewrote history. God Valley was already doomed. So if you want to understand what really happened here, or what really happened there, we cannot start with the battle. We have to start with the question the world government never wanted anyone to ask. Why God Valley? See, God Valley was not chosen randomly. This was one of the most important details in the entire flashback. The Celestial Dragons did not simply choose an island because it looked convenient. They chose God Valley because the island had already committed the greatest crime possible in the eyes of the world government. It refused to submit. God Valley refused world government affiliation, and that detail matters because the world government did not only rule through military strength, it ruled through recognition, through nations accepting its authority, through kings bending the knee and agreeing that the Celestial Dragons stand above everyone else. That is how the system survives, not just through power, but through the illusion that its power is natural, that it is permanent, that it is unquestionable. So when an island refuses to join that system, it becomes dangerous because independence gives people another possibility. It tells the world government, just maybe the government is not absolute. Maybe the gods can be rejected. Maybe a kingdom can exist without bowing to Marijoa. And the examples like that cannot be allowed to survive. But God Valley had something else too, resources. Valuable resources the world government wanted. So the island was not only politically inconvenient, it was useful. And that is what makes the crime even worse, because the Celestial Dragons did not just see God Valley as a rebellious island, they saw it as property waiting to be taken, a place that refused to join them, a place that carried resources they wanted, a place that could be punished publicly while being exploited privately. And then there was the name, God Valley. To normal people, that name might sound sacred, ancient, maybe even beautiful. But to the Celestial Dragons, it was blasphemy. Because in their minds, they are the gods of the world. They are the descendants of the creators. They are the ones who sit above humanity. So an unaffiliated island carrying the name God Valley was almost an insult to their existence. And that became the excuse. The name was the excuse. Independence was the crime. That is the kind of evil Oda is showing us here. The Celestial Dragons did not just kill people because they're basically cruel. They created a reason. They dressed oppression up as punishment. They took an independent island, right? Called its name blasphemous and turned its people into target. God Valley was punished before the hunt ever began, before the pirates arrived, before the Marines arrived, before the world ever heard the official version of the incident. The island had already been condemned, and once the Celestial Dragons made that decision, the people of God Valley were no longer citizens. They were no longer family. They were no longer human beings in the eyes of the god. They were rabbits, points, prizes, bodies placed on a board for nobles to hunt. That is where the God Valley incident truly begins. Not with Rogs, not with Roger, not with Garp, but with the world governments deciding that an island that refused to bow had forfeited its right to exist. But the deepest reason God Valley mattered may not have been its name. It may not have been its resources. It may not have even been its refusal to join the world government. It was who was hiding, or who the island was hiding. The Davy clan. The detail completely changes the scale of this incident because the native hunting competition was already horrifying on its own. The Celestial Dragons hunting civilians and slaves for entertainment is already one of the darkest things Oda has ever written. But God Valley was not only a hunting ground, it was a purge. The Davy family, or the Davy clan, was hiding on that island. And to the world government, that made God Valley a threat tied to something much older than modern politics. Much older than ordinary piracy. Much older than the current generation. A name they feared. A name they wanted to erase. A name connected to Davy Dijo. And that matters because One Piece has always treated names like inherited weapons. The name of D, the name of Joy Boy, the name of Nika, the name of Roger. Names survive even when people die. Names carry history. Names carry will. And the world government understands that better than anyone. That is why they erase names. That is why they erase islands. That is why they rewrite history. Because sometimes a name is more dangerous than an army. So when the Davy family hit on God Valley, the island became more than a rebellious nation. It became a hiding place for the bloodline the world government wanted to remove from the world. That means the hunting or the hunt was never just random cruelty. It had layers. On the surface, it was entertainment for the Celestial Dragon. Underneath that, it was punishment for an independent island. And underneath that, it was the attempted erasure of a family. A bloodline purge disguised as a game. The Celestial Dragons were not just hunting people. They were trying to erase a name. And this is where Rogs becomes impossible to separate from the tragedy. Because Rogs was connected to the Davy family. His bloodline was tied to the very thing the world government was hunting. So when Rogs eventually comes to God Valley, it's not just a pirate attacking an island. It's not just a captain chasing treasure. It's a man returning to the place where the government is trying to erase everything connecting to him. His name, his bloodline, his family, his past, and possibly his future. That makes God Valley personal. It makes it political, and it makes it tragic because the world governments thought it was staging a hunting game. But what it really created was a point of collision. A place where every secret it tried to bury started moving towards the surface at the same time. The Davy family, the Celestial Dragons, Rogs, Tej, Eris, Emu, the Hidden King, the False Gods, all of it was moving towards God Valley. And nobody on that island understood yet that they were standing inside the origin point of the Final Saga. Before God Valley became incident history remembers, Rogs Xebec was already a nightmare for the world government. And this is what the newer flashback material makes clear. Rogs was not just a strong pirate. He was not just another ambitious captain chasing treasure. He was a direct threat to the structure of the world. Before Luffy punched a Celestial Dragon, before Dragon declared war on Marijoa, before Roger became Pirate King, Rox had already challenged the gods at the center of the world. He destroyed the gates of justice. He penetrated the chamber of flowers. He confronted Emu. That is one of the most insane reveals in the entire Final Saga, because the chamber of flowers is not just another room. It's the hidden heart of the world's lie. The empty throne is supposed to prove that no single king rules the world. It's supposed to be the symbol of balance between nations, a promise that no one sits above humanity. But Emu exists, and Rox reached that truth. That changes everything, because Rox was not dangerous only because he was strong. He was dangerous because he knew. He knew the truth was a lie. He knew the world had a hidden ruler. He knew the gods had a master. He knew the system was not built on justice or balance. It was built on secrecy. And that knowledge made him more dangerous than any pirate fleet, because a strong pirate can be defeated. A dangerous truth can be spread. That is why Rox feels different from Roger. Roger pursued freedom. Rox pursued upheaval. Roger laughed when he reached the final island. Rox looked at the hidden king of the world and wanted to challenge the throne itself. And that is why his dream of becoming the king of the world feels different now. On the surface, it sounds like pure arrogance, a pirate wanting to rule everything. But once you knew Emu exists, once you know Rox encountered the secret king, that dream becomes something else. It becomes a declaration. If the world already had or has a hidden king, then Rox wanting to become the king of the world was not just ambition. It was a challenge to the person already sitting above everyone. And that is what makes him terrifying. Not because he was good, not because he was noble, not because he was secretly a hero. Rox was still dangerous. He was violent. He wanted power. He gathered monsters, but he was dangerous in a way the world government could not tolerate. He was a pirate who had seen behind the curtain, behind the veil. And instead of running from that truth, he started building enough power to tear the curtain down. That is why the world government erased him. Not just because he attacked them, but because he reached places no other outsider was supposed to reach. Learned things no pirate was supposed to learn, and then refused to disappear quietly. And then Rox, he did not build power randomly. He built it through Hachinosu, the pirate island. Sounds familiar, right? Full of lead. The island that will become the center of the pirate chaos, and before the Blackbeard pirates even claimed it. Rox saw Hachinosu for what it could become. Not just a hideout, not just a pirate port, a kingdom outside the world government's rule, a place where the law of Marijoa meant nothing, a place where strength, ambition, and violence could create a different kind of order, or maybe this order dressed up as freedom. That is what makes Hachinosu so important, because Hachinosu represents the opposite of the world government. The world governments control through hierarchy. Hachinosu operates through chaos. The world government hides behind divine authority. Hachinosu puts power in the open. The world government says only gods can stand above others. Hachinosu says anyone strong enough can take throne. That is why Rox building his base there matters. He was not just gathering pirates. He was creating a rival model of the world, a pirate kingdom. And the way he gathered his crew tells you everything about that model. Through Davy back fights, Rox did not build a family. He did not build trust. He did not inspire loyalty the way Roger or Luffy would. He collected monsters. He pulled powerful people into his orbit by force, competition, reputation, and ambition. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, Shakky, Captain John, Gloriosa, Stussy. These were not crewmates in the way the Straw Hats are crewmates. They were future legends trapped on the same ship, each with their own ambition, each with their own ego, each wanting for the moment they could gain something from that chaos. That is why the Rox pirates were so terrifying, and why they were doomed, because a crew built only on ambition can conquer for a while, but it cannot survive trust being required. And this is where the future Yonko becomes more interesting. Whitebeard eventually creates a family because he has lived through a crew without one. Big Mom created a forced unity because she saw power as something to gather and control. Kaido created a kingdom of strength because he believed power was the only truth. And Blackbeard Well, Blackbeard returned to Hachinosu, and that parallel is impossible to ignore. Hachinosu was not just Rox's base. It was the first version of the world Blackbeard is trying to build. A world without the government's rule. A world where the strongest take what they want. A world where chaos is not a floor, it's a system. That is why Rox still matters, because even after God Valley, even after his death, his idea survived in Pirate Island, in Blackbeard, in the Davy name, and in the possibility that the world can be taken from the gods by force. But Rox was not the only man trying to change the world. Across the sea in Elbaph, another dream was forming, a completely different dream. King Harold. Elbaph was a kingdom built on warrior pride, strength, conquest, battle, and for generations the giants were known as the strongest army in the world. To outsiders, Elbaph was not a place of diplomacy, it was a place of warrior, a place where strength shaped itself as identity, a place where honor was proven through battle. But Harold wanted something different after exploring. He wanted Elbaph to evolve. He wanted diplomacy, peace, a connection with humans. He taught humans celestial navigation. He reached beyond the island. He tried to move Elbaph away from endless wars towards coexistence. And that makes Harold one of the most important emotional pieces of the God Valley story. Because Harold was not weak. He was not naive. He understood power. He understood violence. He understood what Elbaph was built on, but he believed the world could still change without destroying itself. That belief is important because it creates the central conflict of this entire era. Rox looked at the world and saw a system that needed to be torn down. Harold looked at the world and saw a system that might still be changed. Rox wanted a revolution through force, and Harold wanted reform through diplomacy. And the world government wanted neither. The world government did not want true reform. It wanted obedience. It did not want peace between equals. It wanted affiliation under its control. It is what makes Harold's dream so tragic. He thought Elbaph could enter the world and remain itself. He thought diplomacy could protect his people. He thought compromise could create a future. But in One Piece, compromise with the world government always has a cost. And eventually, the cost becomes Rox. Now, this is where the story genuinely turns tragic, because Rox and Harold were not just enemies. They were friends. They drank together at Ida's bar and they debated. They argued. They looked at the same broken world and saw the same corruption. That is what makes their relationship so compelling. They were not opposites because one understood the world and the other did not. They both understood it. They both knew the world government was rotten. They both knew the celestial dragon stood above humanity like false gods. They both knew the world needed change, but they could not agree on how. Harold believed change had to come through diplomacy, through Elbaph entering the world stage, through the giants and humans building the future together. Rox believed it was impossible, because to Rox, the system was too corrupt to reform. You cannot negotiate with gods who hunt people for sport. You cannot politely ask a hidden king to step down. You cannot build peace inside a world designed to protect monsters. So Rox wanted Harold's help, and he had a reason. Elbaph mattered. The giants mattered. Harold mattered. Rox understood that if Marijoa was going to fall, Elbaph would be necessary or essential. And that is where the devil fruit becomes important. Rox wanted Harold to eat one of the fruits connected to overwhelming Marijoa. This is not just about making Harold stronger. It was about placing Elbaph at the center of a war against the god. But when Kaido suggested forcing Harold, Rox refused, because Harold was his friend. That one detail changed Rox. It does not make him innocent, it does not make him a hero, but it makes him human. Because for all his ambition, for all his violence, for all the desire to become the king of the world, there was still a line he would not cross with Harold. And that makes what happens next even crueler, because the five elders eventually demanded that Harold kill Rox as a condition for Elbaph joining the world government. That is not politics. That That is psychological violence. The world government did not simply ask Harold for loyalty. They asked him to prove loyalty. They wanted Harold to offer rocks as the price of Elbaph's future. And Harold chose Elbaph. He chose diplomacy. He chose the path he believed would protect his people. But to Rox, that choice was betrayal. Because from Rox's perspective, Harold has chosen the very system they both knew was corrupt. The friendship broke. The visits stopped. The dreams split in two. And that is what makes God Valley hurt before the battle even begins. Because by the time the incident happens, Rox had already lost something. Not his crew, right? Not his family. Not his life. His belief that Harold might stand with him when the world finally broke. Rox and Harold were two friends who looked at the same broken world and chose opposite answers. One tried to work with the system, one tried to destroy it. And God Valley will prove that both paths came with a cost. And then there's Loki, because Loki's story cannot be separated from what happened between Harold and Rox. Loki met Rox in Elbaph's underworld, and from the beginning, Rox left an impression on him. That matters because Loki was not just watching political conflict from a distance. He was growing up inside of it. His father was trying to reshape Elbaph into something peaceful, right? Rox was trying to reshape the world through force. The world government was manipulating both, and Loki was caught in the shadow of all three. This is why Loki feels so important now. He's not just a dangerous prince. He's a consequence, a child shaped by the failure of peace, the temptation of a rebellion, and the manipulation of the world government. Imagine being Loki in the world. Your father is praised by some for trying to change or revolutionize Elbaph, but others see him as betraying Giant's tradition. Rox appears like a force of nature, powerful, uncompromising, a man who sees the world government for what it is and refuses to bow. And then that same man disappears from Elbaph after his friendship with Harold breaks. To a child like Loki, that kind of wound does not just fade. It becomes part of how you understand the world. Peace looks weak. Diplomacy looks like compromise. Compromise looks like betrayal, and rebellion starts looking like the truth. That is why Loki's connection to Rox matters. No, because Loki inherited more than a kingdom. He inherited a broken argument. Harold's dream that the world could be changed peacefully. Rox's dream that the world could be taken by force. And a world government proof that it could destroy both dreams and survive. Loki was not born into peace. He was born into the wreckage of two failed dreams. And God Valley is the shadow hanging over all of it. Now I'm talking about Loki, but of course Hydruden is also there, okay? But God Valley did not become a world-shaking incident from politics alone. It became one because the hunt pulled way too many people towards the same island. And one of the biggest sparks was Shakky. Before the incident, Shakky was abducted from Hachinosu. In the twisted logic of the celestial dragons, she became a grand prize in the native hunting competition. That is disgusting on every level because Shakky was not treated like a person. She was treated like a trophy, a reward, a possession to be won by the person who performed best in a genocide. That alone tells you everything about how the celestial dragons see the world. They did not just believe they own land. They believe they own people. They believe beauty, life, bloodlines, kingdoms, and futures are all prizes they can collect. And because Shakky mattered to the people outside of the world government's control, her abduction helped turn the hunt into a convergence point. The Roger pirate had a reason to come. Rayleigh definitely had a reason to fight. Pirates across the sea had a reason to move. And Garland's desire to claim her added another layer to the ugliness of the event. Because God Valley was not just cruelty for entertainment. It was desire backed by absolute power. The celestial dragons wanted resources. They wanted bloodline. They wanted slaves. They wanted prizes. And Shakky became one of the symbols of that system, or of that entire system. Person turned into property by people calling themselves gods. Shakky was not just a prize. She was one of the sparks that turned a private genocide into a world earth-shaking incident. Because the moment people outside the world government learned she was there, God Valley stopped being contained. The world government wanted a closed event, a secret slaughter, a controlled hunt. But Shakky's presence held pull pirates towards the island. And once pirates started moving, the gods lost control of their own game. And then Jenny, of course, changes everything because the world government built God Valley to be a private massacre. But Jenny turned it into a signal flare. She leaked the event to Morgan's, and that single act shattered the government's control over the situation. And that is important because the world government's greatest weapon had always been control of information. They control history. They control the newspapers. They control what kingdoms are allowed to see. They control which islands are remembered and which islands disappear. But Jenny broke that control, even only for a moment. Suddenly, information escaped the island. The world outside began to move. Pirates heard about the prizes. Pirates heard about Shakky. Pirates heard the celestial dragons were gathered on God Valley. And once that information spread, the incident became unstoppable because the celestial dragons believed they were staging another hunting game, another massacre hidden behind privilege and secrecy. But Jenny made sure the island would not stay hidden long enough. That makes her role bigger than simple survival. Jenny did not just simply run. She exposed, she turned the world government's private evil into a crisis. And this is one of the most important acts in the entire flashback. Because without the leak, God Valley may have remained only a slaughter. With the leak, it became a convergence. Rocks came, Roger came, Garp came, the pirates came. The world government created a slaughterhouse. Jenny opened the doors, and once those doors were open, the gods could no longer control who entered. And then there's Dragon. Before the revolutionary army was created, before he declared war against the gods, Dragon was a marine, a cadet, someone still inside the system. That is what makes his presence at God Valley very, very important. Because Dragon did not learn about the world government's evil from a book. He did not hear rumors from revolutionaries. He witnessed it while wearing their uniform. He saw civilians being rounded up. He saw people reduced to target. He saw the world nobles treat humans like animals. He saw Kuma almost get killed. And in one crucial moment, Dragon defied orders and tranquilized a world noble. That matters because Dragon's rebellion did not begin as an army. It begins as a refusal. A single moment where a young marine looked at what he was being asked to accept and rejected it. That is powerful because up to this point, Dragon may have believed the Marines could represent justice. Maybe not perfect justice, maybe not clean justice, but something worth serving. God Valley destroyed that illusion. Where Marines are running up civilians for the gods to hunt. What justice is it where a kid Puma is targeted? What justice is it where law is protected the people committing the crime? This is likely where Dragon begins to understand the problem is not a few bad nobles, it's the entire system itself. And once he sees that, there's no going back. God Valley becomes the ideological birthplace of Dragon's rebellion. The place where a Marine cadet sees the truth from the inside and starts becoming the man who will one day declare war on the god. Before Dragon became a revolutionary, he witnessed what justice looked like when it served monsters. And then the hunt began. The celestial dragons gathered, the island was divided into targets, civilians became rabbits, special victims became rare rabbits. The Davy family became super rabbits, Kuma became a target, Shakky becomes the grand prize. The reward? Well, devil fruits are the reward, and the so-called gods of the world turned an island into a scoreboard. Around 100,000 people were trapped inside the game designed for their extinction. Think about how horrifying it is. 100,000 people, families, children, elders, people who woke up on their island and suddenly became part of a game they never agreed to play. Their homes became hunting grounds. Their roads became escape routes. Their forests became hiding places. Their lives became points. And before the competition even officially began, Garling had already killed God Valley's king, killed the woman who was the mother for Shanks and his brother. It was already a mess. Garling already gave up and snitched on the island. That is how the island was found and all of that. So Garling kills God Valley's king, not as a mistake, not as an act of war, as a display, right? And for starting early, he receives only a penalty. That detail tells you everything. The murder of a king was not treated like a crime. It was treated like a rule violation. Because in this system, the lives of ordinary people do not matter. Only the game matters. Only the nobles matter. Only the gods matter. Saturn watched. The god knights moved. The celestial dragons cheered. Yeah, yeah. And the people of God Valley ran for their lives. That was what God Valley was truly before the pirates arrived. Not as a battle, a slaughterhouse. A valley where the gods came down to hunt. And at this point, every major tragedy had already been placed on the board. The Davy family was marked, Kuma was marked, Shakky was trapped, Dragon was shaken. Jenny had sensed the signal, of course. Harold's friendship with Rogs had already collapsed, and Loki's future had already been poisoned by the old generation's failures. And the celestial dragons still believed they were in control. They believed this was just another hunt, another game, another display of their divinity. But they had no idea what was coming towards them. They had no idea. And honestly, this is what makes God Valley so horrifying. Before the legendary battle ever began, before Roger and Garp ever stood against Rogs, before the newspapers created a hero, the island was already bleeding. God Valley had already been chosen. The Davy family had already been marked. Shakky had already been reduced to a prize. Dragon had already started questioning justice. Kuma, Ivankov, and Jenny were already fighting to survive. Harold had already lost his friend. Loki had already inherited a shadow of a broken world. And the celestial dragons, well, they believed they were still in control. They believed this was their island, their game, their slaughterhouse, their proof that they were gods. But because of Jenny's leak, the world was coming. Rox was coming. Roger was coming. Garp was coming. The strongest pirate crew in history was approaching. The future pirate king was approaching. The marine who would be called the hero of the marines was approaching. And the island the celestial dragons chose to prove their divinity was about to become the place where even gods learned fear. Because God Valley was not just a day a battle began. It was the day every lie holding the world together started cracking at once. The world government created God Valley to prove they were gods. But then the pirates arrived.